Welcome back to the Danube Swabian History Series. In Episode 1, we explored who the Danube Swabians were and how German-speaking populations eventually spread into southeastern Europe. In this episode, we're going deeper into one of the largest organized migration movements in European history, the colonization of the Danube frontier following the Ottoman withdrawal from Central Europe. This was not simply migration. It was survival. Entire families left devastated German regions after generations of war, famine, taxation, and instability, hoping for land, security, economic opportunity, and a future for their children. Many would travel hundreds of miles down the Danube River, into territories that were still dangerous, underdeveloped, and scarred by war. The journey changed European history forever. For centuries, southeastern Europe had been one of the most violent frontier regions in Europe. The Ottoman Empire and the Habsburg monarchy fought repeated wars across Hungary, Serbia, Croatia, Romania, and surrounding territories. Entire regions were repeatedly invaded, burned, depopulated, and militarized. By the late 16th century, after major Habsburg victories including the Battle of Vienna in 1683, Ottoman control began collapsing across large portions of Central Europe. But victory did not mean prosperity. Large sections of the Danube frontier had been devastated. Villages sat abandoned, fields were overgrown, infrastructure barely existed, disease was widespread. Banditry remained common. In some areas, population loss had become catastrophic. The Habsburg Empire now faced a massive problem. They controlled enormous territories that lacked enough people to rebuild them. The Habsburg monarchy responded with one of the most ambitious settlement campaigns in European history. Imperial authorities actively recruited colonists from German-speaking territories throughout the Holy Roman Empire. Many of these recruits came from regions devastated by the 30 Years' War, economic collapse, crop failures, heavy taxation, and political instability. The promises sounded life-changing. Settlers were told they could receive land, reduced taxes, religious freedom in some areas, and opportunities unavailable at home. For struggling families in southwestern Germany, the Rhineland, Alsace, Bavaria, and Austria, these offers represented hope. Some families sold nearly everything they owned to make the journey. Others borrowed money or traveled in organized groups. Most had no idea what truly awaited them. Many modern descendants imagine their ancestors simply seeking adventure. In reality, many families left because they were desperate. Large sections of German-speaking Europe had suffered repeated catastrophe during the 16th century and early 17th century. War had destroyed infrastructure. Taxes increased. Land became scarce. Inheritance systems often divided farms into plots too small to support future generations. For younger sons especially, opportunities could be extremely limited. Families faced impossible decisions: stay and risk starvation or debt, or leave everything behind for a dangerous unknown frontier. For many colonists, migration down the Danube represented one final attempt to secure survival for future generations. One of the most iconic symbols of Danube Swabian migration was the Ulmer Schachteln. These were simple wooden riverboats constructed primarily in the city of Ulm. The boats were designed for downstream travel only. Once they reached southeastern Europe, many were dismantled and the wood reused. Conditions on board were extremely difficult. Families traveled crowded together with children, livestock, supplies, tools, and personal possessions. The Danube itself could be dangerous. Floods, storms, disease, accidents, and food shortages all threatened migrants during the journey. Some settlers died before ever reaching their destinations. Yet despite the risks, migration continued for generations. The journey down the Danube was physically exhausting and emotionally terrifying. Many migrants had never traveled far from their home villages before departure. Now they found themselves floating through unfamiliar territories stretching hundreds of miles into southeastern Europe. The environment changed constantly. Dense forests, marshlands, remote military zones, ruined settlements, foreign languages and customs. Disease spread easily in crowded conditions. Children were especially vulnerable. Some migrants reached the frontier only to discover conditions far harsher than recruiters had promised. Yet many continued forward because turning back was impossible. Despite enormous hardship, settlers gradually transformed the frontier. German-speaking colonists helped establish hundreds of villages across Hungary, Banat, Bachka, Slavonia, Romania, and surrounding territories. They introduced farming systems, trade networks, craft traditions, and village organization patterns carried from their original homelands. Entire communities emerged from regions that had once been war zones. Churches were built, schools appeared, roads expanded, agriculture recovered. Over time, these settlements formed the foundation of what later became known collectively as the Danube Swabian population. Although many settlers originated from German-speaking regions, they did not remain culturally identical to the populations they left behind. Life on the frontier created a new identity. Communities blended traditions from multiple German regions, while also adapting to local influences throughout southeastern Europe. Dialects changed, food traditions evolved, architecture adapted to climate and geography. Regional customs developed unique characteristics. Over time, these frontier settlers became something distinct, the Danube Swabians. Their identity would continue evolving for centuries. It is important not to romanticize this migration story. Behind every settlement map and historical statistic were real human beings facing extraordinary hardship. Families buried loved ones during migration. Some never saw relatives again after departure. Others struggled with isolation in unfamiliar lands surrounded by military conflict and uncertainty. Migration often carried deep emotional trauma. Yet these families continued because they believed survival required sacrifice. For descendants today, understanding that emotional reality helps transform genealogy from names on paper into human history. The colonization of the Danube frontier permanently reshaped southeastern Europe. What began as imperial settlement policy became the foundation of entire communities whose descendants would spread across the world. For genealogists, historians, and descendants alike, this migration story explains why so many families with German roots later appear in Hungary, Romania, Serbia, Croatia, and beyond. It also reminds us that migration history is deeply human. These were families risking everything for the possibility of survival and opportunity. Their decisions shaped generations to come. Thank you so much for joining me for episode 2 of this Danube Swabian History Series. In upcoming episodes, we'll continue exploring Danube Swabian settlements, village life, religion, genealogical records, World War II experiences, post-war expulsions, diaspora communities, and modern DNA connections. If you enjoyed this presentation, please like, subscribe, follow, and share.